So our next stamp in the Country Walk collection is actually called a Country Walk, and as you can see from this stamp here, we have a gorgeous countryside scene with our stone walls, our gates, and our mountains and hills, and our sentiments are follow your own path, miles apart but close at heart. All journeys begin with the first step and sending love across the miles. So you can see here is the full list of the collection available. So let's get some stamping done. Okay, we've got our stamping platform here and our stamp. So what I'm going to do here now is I've got an A5 sheet of card set down, and we'll trim that later. We take the stamp off the carrier sheet, so take off the protective film at the front, then gently ease away the backing from the stamp, not to pull and stretch the stamp even though they're quite sturdy. So work your way around. Then we are going to place the stamp in the center of the paper, line it up like so, and then with the stamping platform you just close the lid, press it down gently just enough to pick up the stamp. When you're happy, then you open it up gently, and there you have it. I'm just going to adjust the magnets a little bit here so I can make sure that the paper doesn't move. Then I'm using a Stays On black ink pad, and I'm just loading up the stamp. I'm going to put loads on this because I actually am going to prime the stamp first, as it's the first time using it. So building up layer by layer on it, you can be quite generous with this. And then we close it over on our sheet, and then using some pressure from our hands, we just place it over it. Once the image has been removed from the stamping platform, then we'll prepare to colour. And I have got in front of me here some masking tape that I'm going to just secure the paper to the mat. I am not using watercolor paper, but I won't be using a lot of water when I'm painting. So here I have the Zealer watercolor set, and I'm just going to start there by just dampening the brush, and then we just take away the excess water and go over and pick our color. I think we're going to start with the sky, so I've got the blue color here for that. So putting it down on the palette here, because I'll add a little bit more water to this just so that it spreads out a bit more. So just going to load up the palette here, a little bit of color, bring in a little bit more water just to water it down, and then we'll start. Now I don't want a heavy coat on this, so I'm just going to start at the mountains, and that's where the deepest colour will be, and then as I move up and I add a little bit more water to this, it will thin out, so you get a darker shade down near the mountains, and then it will get a little bit lighter then as you move on up to the sky and the clouds. So we're going to change the brush here now. I'm just going for a wider brush. It just speeds up the process for us here. And now I will just dab it in there and then work away on. See, add a little bit more water and it just dilutes the color a little bit, and then it spreads it out a bit more. So I'm going to work away here now, and then I will speed up the process a little bit for us. So I will talk to you again when I have the image of the sky colored. Okay, now we have done the sky. We're going to move on then. So I'm just going to clean this brush here now, and we will then move in with a smaller headed brush here and pick a new color. So we're going to work now with the background to try and build that up a bit. So I'm going to go with a little bit of red first because I want to add, it's kind of like an evening sunset to the back of the mountain. So picking up a little bit of red, I'm just going right onto the horizon here. You see, just beside those trees and in behind, just along the rim there. Not too much. Just lay down some colour. And if you do add a bit too much, you can go back later on and you can water it down. So with the reflection up on the clouds as well, just adding a little bit in there and then just bringing it up. Now I'm going over the edge of the stamp as well. But don't worry about that. That's just to add a little bit more to it. So a bit more on the clouds. So clean the brush there, dab it off, and then we are going to come in with the larger brush there that's still a bit damp. And we're just going to blend it in, blending it up into the sky. It's quite subtle, but it works quite well. So then I think I'm happy enough there at the sky. So to extend out the stamp, because it's not, the full width of the paper, but we are going to trim it down. There's a little trick that you can do. Just go with your colour. Don't worry about the lines of the stamp. Just don't be afraid to colour outside the lines, because you can come back to that later on with either a fine liner pen or using your black paint and a thin brush. You can extend it. So we're going to start with the greenery, and I'm laying down a light green kind of wash here, just to bring it in at the background. And bearing in mind where our wall is, so we're coming down to the wall here. Let's just bring that in, going in around the detail. Don't forget there's gaps in the gate, so we're popping that in there, and then coming up the other side of the hill there. So bringing in the detail, but again we're extending it out even though we don't have the pen line there. We just work that out to the edges of the page. We'll be trimming off most of this anyway, so it won't really matter. So there we have, so it's using the lighter tone, because if you use the lighter tone, you can come back in later on then with a darker tone to give your shading. So working down the bottom, I'm leaving the gap there, you can see, because that's where the stone wall will be, and I'll be extending out the grey for the stone wall there. So see, it's getting a little bit deeper now, just coming along with the line and just bringing it down. And then we're going to work on the other side. So just bring that out there. Then using the flat brush is great because it gives you a lot more coverage. So there we go. You see now the back has dried out a bit. So coming in with a bit of a deeper tone of it, a bit drier, so the brush doesn't have to be that wet, so obviously the more you water down the color, the more opaque it'll be. So it's a bit drier now, so I'm just coming in, touching up around the edges where the sky meets the grass there, just dabbing it in, adding my shades and my highlights, and we can come back again over that when it's dried out a bit, with an even deeper tone, cleaning the brush as you go along, taking off the excess as well. So we're going to get a smaller, thinner brush now, again dabbing off the excess water that's on that, and I'm looking there now where I need my shading and what other greenery needs doing. So we have some detail that's in here in the gate, so I have to use a smaller brush just to get in there, just to put down the colour wash for that. So adding that in, taking care not to mix up your greenery with your footpath, and dabbing that in, picking up a bit more green, adding it to the palette, and you see it's just a little bit darker now coming in. And so we'll come back later on and we'll add some more tone if needed. And we see there the gate. The gate will have its own shadow, and we'll do that when we're colouring in the footpath. So nearly done here now with the green, but we have our mountains and hills at the back as well. So just coming along that, I'm just putting down a light colour wash on this as a base, taking care not to saturate the paper because it is just general cardstock. It's not watercolour cardstock. So we don't want it to warp too much, but if you don't use too much water, you'll get away with just general white cardstock. So clean the brush there now, and we're going to come in with a darker green tone. So now we're going to go back and we're going to add some shading and tone. You see there on the palette what a difference that tone is. There, pick up a bit more, adding it to the palette and working it in there. So I don't water it down too much but we do need to clean the brush off, wet the tip, and then come back, and I'm going to get a little bit of the darker green as well. Put that out on the palette just to have it there ready for adding our shading. So there's 3 tones of green, excuse me, in this palette, which is great for doing your landscapes and your shading. Now an even finer brush again, not going to wet it, I'm just going to pick up the shading, and you see here now I'm going to work it in on the back. So we have some fields here. So to distinguish out the different fields, we're going to put different tones in each one, but we're going to start with a darker tone at the top, and then we'll blend it down as you come down the field. So have a little bit of fun with the colors as well, because when you look at fields, they have different tones. Some are ploughed, some have got tillage in them, and some of them you know, maybe have hay or barley, so you can play around with the tones. Don't forget your foliage in the back. I'm using the darker tones in the back just to let the trees stand out that are in the back of the horizon. So the darker at the back, and as it comes toward you, then you've got the lighter tones, and that will give you the dimension that you need. So adding a little bit of shading here under the trees and coming down there on top of the hill, I think it gives it a nice effect. So we will carry on here with the painting the greenery and adding our shades and our tones. Okay, we are going to move on now, and as you can see, the greenery is looking quite good, but we need to concentrate on the walls here. I'm going to take the larger flat brush again, just give it a good clean, and dab off the excess. And then I think we're going to go in and pick up the mid-tone of the greys. Again, I'm just putting down a colour wash as a foundation. I will be coming back for more with a darker tone. So starting on the brickwork, just dabbing it to the sides, and then we're going to wash it across the whole project there, all the way to the edge as we've done before. Okay, so pick up more color, and we can add more water if we need to, but we're just laying down, as I said, this is just a color foundation for the base. Okay, as I was saying earlier on, when your stamp doesn't expand enough out for you, you can do this yourself. So taking some of the black watercolor and a fine brush, I'm going to go in and I'm going to add some extra detail. You see, you just do it with your brush, you just play around and just extend it out a bit. I'm not going to do too much because I know that I'm going to be trimming this in quite close for my project, but you could actually have fun with this and expand out the detailing as you move along. And as you can see, a little bit of paint goes a long way on this brush. So you're just dabbing in here, you know, finishing off the bricks, tidying things up a little bit as well. So you can also use this technique as well if you want to hand letter or write your own message on the image. So we're just going to clean off that brush there, and I'm going to come in with another one here, and again we're going to water down the black this time because I'm going to add shading. So I've already had my grey base down, that's dried. So by watering down the black, it gives me an opportunity to go back in over the bricks and add some dark shading here and there to it. It's quite effective. You don't want it too dark, but if it does end up too dark for you, just go back in with a clean brush with some water on it, and you can just continue there to add the detailing and to add the shading. You know, it's quite a fun technique. So we're going to add a little bit more here. You see where there's plants against the wall, there'll be a bit of shade beside that, and then the bottom of the wall as well, and the bricks. And I think that's quite effective. So don't forget to do the other side as well. If your brush is too dry, just add more water to the mix, and again go in, add your shading. You know, you, if it does get saturated or too much, you can always wet it, dab it off with a bit of kitchen roll, and then come back in and work the area as well again. So that's the beauty of the watercolor paints for this. So we'll just add a little bit more here now, coming back in there at the side of the bricks, and you can see the detail and the dimension that is being added here to it. So it's quite a fun technique, and I think it's turning out quite lovely here. So I think we kind of enough shading. We're just coming down where the poles from the gate would meet the stonework. So we're going to clean off our brushes as well. And then we are going to move on, I think, to work on, we still have the gate to do, and we still have the footpath to do. So I'm going to come in here with the kind of an ochre tone, put it on my palette to water it down, and then we're going to work the footpath. So this is just like a wash that I'm going to put down. This will be my base, because like we've done with the greenery and we've done with the stonework, we're going to be adding some shading to this as well. So we're just going to bring that down to where the grass would be. Again, we're going to extend out over the natural line of the stamp. So just adding a little bit more water just to bring down the colour wash here and go across on a line. Now you could come down a bit further if you wanted as well, you know, and fill up the whole bottom of that page. So just working it in to the shading area. That's just under the gate, bringing it down, and we'll work our way all the way down to the edges. Okay, so we're going to pick it up here now, where we're going to add some shading. So I've got some browns here, so a kind of a deep brown here, watered down, and I'm just going to come to the the edge of the footpaths where it will meet the greenery, and where there's some stones, and where there will be a shadow from the wall. And we're just going to go along the edges here now, and we're just going to work that out into the center of the footpath, just to add the shading that's in there, keeping the brush moist. And then I will go in now, I'm going to go for an even deeper brown now, because we have the gate as well. We don't want the gate to be hidden in the same tones as with the footpath. So just add it to the palette there, and just water that down. And then we're going to come in and we're going to start with the woodwork. Now this is going to be our base, so we've watered down the tone. I think we need a little bit more here on the palette, yeah. So we're going to fill in the lats of the gate, putting down some colour, and then using a wet brush to kind of draw it out and into the shapes. We're going to be coming back and adding some shadows to this, but for now we're just going to lay down the foundation for the gate. Isn't that beautiful? And the tones work, you know, they kind of blend in with the colour of the fields that are out in the horizon as well, and it does tie it all together. So when you're picking your papers for your project, think of the colours that you've just used in colouring. And actually a tip when you're starting a project is just colour your images first before you choose your papers or your setting for your project, and then the colours, you know, how they turn out in your paintings and your colouring will dictate the papers that you will use, like if you're in card making or indeed scrapbooking. And a handy tip, if you want, you could have used heat embossing powder, black heat embossing powder, to stamp with, and then you could have colored over that then with your watercolors. It would give you a nice sharp clean edge. But I mean, by using the ink pads here, I've used the stays on, which is the solvent ink pad, and water based paints don't affect that. It won't run, it won't bleed. So be careful when you choose the ink that you're using. So if you use a pigment ink pad, it will run with water, but it takes ages to dry the pigment ink. Same with a water based ink pad. If you use that, then your colors are going to just all blend into one. So anyway, going back in here with a darker tone just to add some shadows and shading to our gate there, and I think it's coming along quite well. So again, don't forget, just keep cleaning your brush, dabbing it off, and don't worry if your brushes get discolored. They're still going to be clean when you dip them in the water. So we're going up here now. We're going to pick up a little bit of the grey that we had used earlier, and I'm just going to pick up the little stones and pebbles that are in the project. Just don't forget those the small details. And then we're just going to change the brush here now and going in with a little bit of green, and we're going to touch up any areas that we might have missed earlier. Give them a little bit of shading, and then we're just going to check it over to make sure we've got all the detail. And don't forget, this the small details that have the biggest impact. So we have a little bit of grass here along the footpath, so we're going to use that in a kind of a darker tone, just so it stands out from the base grass that we have there. We don't want to overwork the picture either, but it's important that we pick up all the little details that's in it, and there's a danger if you use too much color overlays that colors might blend into each other. So don't be afraid to use it as dry as possible on your top layers, even though it is a watercolor essentially. So just come back in here now with a bit of dark here. I want to add a little bit of darkness there, to the hardware on the gate, and I think it's looking quite well now. So I don't want to overdo it, but we still have a bit of an area here down on the footpath. So I'm going to come in again with the larger brush, and I'm just going to extend down the color there for the footpath. So just coming in, bringing it down. You see, it's quite easy, and it means you can come back afterwards, even though you painted earlier, it will still blend in with the color that you had put in there before. So just work it in to eradicate that join line that you sometimes see. So working it over it, and it's very easy. Blend in, and it's going to look absolutely lovely when you're done. So there we have it. Okay, we're going to use the finished image in a card project, and you're going to need 2 A4 sheets of card. Okay, but what we've done is I've marked it out here. You're going to cut it 6 inches high and 11 inches long. So I have it marked out here. So you're going to cut away the excess paper that's down the sides. So I will leave this here just so you can take a screenshot. And then these are fold lines. So we're coming an inch in either side, and we're going to have valley fold and mountain folds on these. So I just speeded it up here, and I've already cut out one, and then that is going to be a cover for it. So when you have cut it out, remember, so it's 11 by 6, we're going to then have to score some fold lines on this. So I'm just taking it to the edge of my mat here so you can see the size. So we're going to come in an inch first of all, and then we're going to score this. Now you can use a scoreboard if you want, but I just find it's just as handy to just use a small little ball tool. And then we're going to come to the 2-inch mark and mark a second score line on this, right, all the way through, and then flip it over, and we're going to repeat the process on the other side again at the 1-inch mark. These cutting mats are great because they have the lines marked out for you. It doesn't have to be too precise, but we're going with the inch, and the second one is the 2 inch. So mark that down, give it a score, and then we're going to fold. So on the middle, the first one, we're folding it over, but then the one nearest the edge, we're folding it back. So it's like kind of accordion. Okay, so that's what you're left with. And then we're going to repeat the process on the other side. And then we're going to fold that back. So then this is what you have then. So the picture's going to go in the center when it's trimmed down, but we're going to have to put a frame over the front of this. And what I've done then is I have cut a sheet of card stock. So this is double-sided kind of a print, but it's actually 6x9. So we're taking some of the length off it. So you see there it's 6. And then when you look down here, then we've got 9 inches. Okay, so that actually compensates for the 2 inches that you lose with the fold. You could see it there. So what I want to do is I want to cut an aperture in the center of this. And what I'm going to do is I just have this generic rectangular frame die. But what I find with some of these dies is finding the center is a bit tricky. So I put them on my cutting mat to get the length, and then I get a Sharpie pen and I mark the center, in the middle and then lengthways as well. It just helps then to give me a guide of where I should place it on my paper. So I'm just going to line up the cardstock on the mat again. And then I'm going to look for the center point. And then I'm going to take the die and see the marking of the center point on the die. Just line that up with roughly where the center is. But I'm going to put it up towards the top because I want to leave some space along the bottom of the paper there so I can add a sentiment into that area then when it's cut. So when I'm happy with the position, I'm going to use some masking tape and putting it on the inside because that's the waste paper that's going to be thrown away when I get it cut. So by the magic of YouTube, I have put this through the die cutting machine. So the waste card is will stay in the frame, and we'll put that to the side and we'll use that later on for something else. So now we are left with the aperture cut in the cardstock and just showing you how that will sit over the card. Perfect, ready to add our image in the center. But I want to spend a little time adding some shading to the paper, so I'm going to be using my Tim Holtz inks. So we've got the frayed burlap here, which is a dark tone, and kind of a lighter tone we're going to use the vintage photo. So I'm going to use 2 ink blenders for this, and we are going to speed things up a little bit as I add shading around the paper. Okay, there we have it. That is our frame, all inked and ready to add to our card. Now you can add this in a couple of ways. You can use liquid glue or you can use red liner tape to secure it. We also have to remember that we have to trim down our centerpiece. But what I've done is I've cut another piece of card that's going to go in the background for this. So again, I'm going to go and I'm going to ink this up ready to place in. So like I did with the frame, but not as much. I'm just going to start off with the lighter coloured. So this is the vintage photo. Again, just working my way around. Try not to oversaturate it. I don't want it as deep or as far up the page as the front cover, because this is really just a background base that we're going to use to stick our previously coloured stamped image onto. So just working way around the edges and making sure that I get all four sides of this. So I'm using these tones, as I said earlier, because it matches the tones that I've used when I was colouring the image. And I'm not going to put the darker tone on. I think I'm happy enough with that. So we're going to glue this into the back. It also strengthens the back panel as well. So adding some liquid glue all around the edges to that, you can see it there. This is a fine point glue applicator. It just gives you enough glue without saturating the cardstock, and you won't end up with any mess afterwards. So just line it up, place it down, and just give it a little press just to ensure that it is stuck in place. So that's all it takes. So perfect. Seeing that our creases still work, or folds, so give them another light burnish, and then we are going to stick the frame front on. I'm only going to stick this on one side because what happens is I want to make sure that I can add our image into it as well afterwards. So speaking of the image, here we have it, and what I've done is, as you can see earlier on, that's the piece that we cut out for the aperture. Okay, so that's the size of the window, and what I want is to use a smaller die, and you can see it here, it's a smaller window. This is what I'm going to put over our coloured image. So as you can see, you can play around, where you want to place it, with higher or lower. I think I'm going to go higher with this to get in all the clouds, and I'm going to tape this down. Now you can go back after this is cut, like I had shown you earlier with the watercolour, and add in some more detailing, carry on with the stamp if you so feel like it, but I think that we're happy enough. And voila, just to speed things up, this is what it looks like when it has been cut out. So the size of this, I'm not going to put too much matting on it, but I do want to kind of age it up a bit, so I'm using the vintage photo again, but not as much as I was doing. So I'm just going to lightly brush the ink over the edges, working my way around. As you can see there, it just takes the edge, softens it a bit, and helps it to blend in with your background papers as well. So just working around. Carefully, don't get ink on your hands and spread it to the image, so just be careful as you're turning it there. But you see how easy that is, just lightly burnishing the edges with the ink blender. There's plenty of ink on the ink blender from the work we did earlier on with it. So just working my way around, seeing if there's any spots, just being careful because you don't want at this stage to end up with a huge big pad mark on it. So just making sure it's even, just double check, giving it a little curve there, because we had used watercolour, the paper has curved a little bit. So putting away the ink now, just a little bit right on the edges of this, in just some places, again just to blend it in, so you'll have the lighter tone goes in a bit further, but the dark tone is really just on the edge of the cardstock, and it just gives it a nice aged and antiqued look when you have finished with that. So again, working my way around, and just check your hands now and again for ink, because many's the time I've put my hand back down on a project after doing this and spread the ink. So what I'm going to do now is, again, just giving it a little curve, and this is ready now to add into our project. Okay, so to add it in, I think for a bit of dimension we may use some pads, but these are the three components that we need now. So we're going to start by gluing down the front, but I don't want to glue both sides. And if you just take a look here, right, yeah, perfect. So I'm going to just glue down one side. Again, just a little bit of glue, it does go a long way with this fine point applicator. And then we're going to line up one side Okay, so make sure that the white card underneath kind of meets the edge of your frame. Turn it around if you have to, line it up, give it a little pinch and then hold it down, and that's perfect. That's ready now, and as you can see, you can still open it to help you with your line. Because it's an inch deep, sometimes just dropping an image in can be a bit tricky, so by leaving it open on one side, it means then that alignment is a little bit easier. So for dimension, I have this foam roll. Now this I got in a hardware store. It is 5 millimeters thick and is amazing. I think it's a draft exclusion foam, but it is double-sided, the tack on it. So I've had this roll a long time, but it's brilliant for dimensional work. So just adding 2 pieces onto the back of this, and then I am going to peel off the backing. Backing is a bit tricky to get off, not like your regular foam pads, so just take your time with it, but it is exceptionally strong. So to line it up, so it's always a little bit tricky, so we can drop it in but don't press it down yet, so just to get a rough idea of where it needs to be. And then you can always, then if you're unsure, you can lift back the front panel just to straighten it up and move it about. So it stuck a little bit, so just really just trying to line it up there, and another couple of little movements. Yeah, I think that should do it now. Sticking that down. Yeah, so I'm happy with that position, so I'm going to go in and just press it further to make sure that it stays in place, and then we can go ahead and seal up the other side. So again, just adding ourselves a little bit of glue down along it, and then like we did with the other side, we just line it up with the base. Just make sure there's none of the white card underneath showing. So just line that up, give it a little press. It dries in a couple of minutes, so it's ready to work on. And so we'll move on now in a moment, and we will add our decorations. Also available in my collection are these MDF leaves. They come in sheets. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the Distress ink again with the frayed burlap, and just laying down a foundation. The MDF is great for absorbing the inks, and then I have this copper gilding paste that I have in my stash. I've put a little bit on card, and I just need a little bit on my finger, and I'm just adding it to the wooden the MDF shape. So it's just to antique it up a bit and just give it a little point of interest. So really just rubbing that on around the edges and in the middle, and then I'll do the same with the other leaf as well, because what I want to do is like play around with this, but I want to add these kind of in the background to other paper flowers on the project. Now you need to burnish off the gilding wax with some tissue or some cloth, just to give it a light rub, and it more like seals it in. So I'll put these to the side and put away the gilding wax and clean up your hands, because this stuff just gets everywhere. The other pieces that I have of the MDF, you can actually cover these in matching cardstock or papers. So I've taken 2 of the leaves here, and I've got some scraps of cardstock. So I want to have the green side shown, so I'm just going to trim off some pieces of this. Okay, so we'll take 2 that are enough to cover the MDF pieces. Right, so but what you need to do is use the liquid glue for this. So just put a little bit down on your MDF pieces, spread it out, but then you can use a paintbrush or your finger simply to just make sure that it meets all the edges of the cardstock. Flip over the card and place face down. Okay, and then we're going to repeat the process with the other leaf. So again, a little bit of glue, and then we rub it around just to get it to the edges, and then as we did with the other one, we're going to flip it around on the wrong side and place it down. And then what you need to do then is you need to let it dry a second or two, and we're going to cut away the excess cardstock. So with the scissors we're just going to trim away, following close to the edge of your MDF piece, because we're going to come back in then with a craft knife and then do the finer details. So it just speeds things up a bit if you just go in with the scissors and you take away the excess. Be careful you don't cut your fingers. Take a bit more care than I am here in this. Okay, so throw away the excess. So we have our two pieces. Then we're going to get the craft knife and I'm going to just work my way around. It's simple, just follow the edges and mark out, you know, at the center, and mark out the lines, and then just take them out in kind of like pieces and triangles. That's what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to work my way around both the pieces. When they're done, you can see there, you know, you can perfectly see the edges, but I want to tidy it up for any stragglers. So just taking an emery board, working my way around just any little bits, just to make sure that I get the profile of the leaf in. So it doesn't take much just to tidy them up, and you don't want to rip the paper. You could distress it even more if you wanted by going in there, but I think it just finishes it off lovely, gives it a nice clean edge and a more of a professional finish. But they're a bit pale, so like the frame, I want to kind of antique these up a little bit more. So this is the Tim Holtz peeled paint pad. So just using one of these small daubers, just lightly brushing around the edges again, and I think it just gives it a nice soft finish, blends it in. I mean, you can go in again with the gilded waxes if you want over the paper to add more of an antique feel to it. But again, continuing on, just lightly dabbing with the peeled paint. Doesn't take much, you just need to give it kind of a hint of aging around it. Okay, so put them down. Always put the lids back on your ink pads to stop them drying out. And we're just going to clear off a little bit of space here now to get ready to assemble, put all our little bits onto our project. So our frame is dry, and I'm going to bring in some extra bits and pieces here, but I do need a sentiment. So I have some cardstock, and this is our stamp set. So I'm going to use the sentiment on the bottom, sending love across the miles. So what I want to do for that then is I'm just going to use a small little acrylic block for this. So peel off the stamp, place it on, and then because I'm not using watercolors, I'm just going to use the just a handy little ink pad here. This is water based, and I won't be putting any watercolor near it, so it's not going to smudge. So just taking a strip of card, this was off of what we'd used earlier, and I'll just trim it down for the moment. And to ensure this fits, I have a small narrow little die here. So we're going to ink up the stamp, and again you can mix and match these stamps and sentiments across the range and play around with them. So stamp our image, and it's a good crisp stamp as well, so it does give a nice sentiment. And then we're going to line up the die over this, ready to cut out. So we're just going to tape it down to stop it moving in the die cutting machine. I'm using an electronic die cutting machine for all my projects, but of course you can use a manual machine as well, and you'll still get the same result. So just like magic, it's cut out, and again we're going to go in and help this blend in with the rest of the project. So very lightly, just going to use the vintage photo and just antique up the sentiment itself. Okay, so just work our way around, and I think it looks nice, you know, just to blend it in rather than having just this stark white card. Now you could matte and layer this, or you could add ribbon, you know, place it on, but I'm going to put this on, but I'm going to use a couple of foam pads on the back of this as well, just to give it dimension and have it stand out at the front of the card. So clearing off the workspace and using the foam that we have earlier. Sorry, it's out of frame there, but I'm just cutting tiny little slivers off, just tiny enough to go on the back. That's where these rolls of foam are great value, because they do last a lot longer than I think the sheets of the foam pads, and with the thickness as well you get great versatility. So again, try and get the backing off of this. It's a little trickier, but we'll get there. And I like that it's black too, so if I'm using dark card it doesn't show up. So I think we will place this, yeah, we'll go with the center. You could offset it, but I'm going to go with the center, line it up and then press it down. Okay, now to press it down, because we have kind of the angles on this, you could just flatten the card out. Okay, so this is all ready now to decorate with some embellishments. And what I've done is I've just gone through my stash and I've picked out some flowers. I love petaloo flowers, you can get them online. So we have then our little bit of hessian here. So I just a bit of hessian ribbon, and I'm just going to use a liquid glue on the back of this to stick it down. I don't want to saturate it because I don't want it coming out through the fibres. So just a little bit on the back. It'll take a little bit longer to dry, but it won't go anywhere then when it's all done. So I'm going to place this down, right, line it up, and again just adding a little bit of pressure there just to allow that to stick. So that's on one side, and then we're going to come in with our wooden embellishments. I'm using a little bit of 3D decoupage glue here in a syringe. It's very handy, so you can actually maneuver them about. It will stay tacky for about 10-15 minutes, and then afterwards it won't move. It'll be solid. It's great if you're using three-dimensional flowers as well, because the liquid paper glue takes too long to dry and it doesn't grip, I feel. So if you can get some hold of some 3D gel silicone for that, and it's not the silicone that you will get in a hardware store which has a very strong smell. This is virtually odorless, and I think Collal make it, so it's Collal 3D gel, and you can just Google that. You can get that on Amazon and other craft stores as well. So we're just lining up. I have a white paper flower there, and I think that flower has been in my stash for about 5 years, so it's finally getting a debut on a project. So I think we're happy enough with that side, and we'll just work up the other side now. I do have a habit of whacking a load of flowers on my projects. So we're going to line up the MDF shapes. Of course, there's a lot more shapes available in the collection, and you can go to bertandgertz.co.uk and to Hobby Maker TV as well, and you can look for Sharon Callis Crafts there, and you will see you can buy the MDF elements in individual sheets, or you can buy them in a bundle. Same with the stamps, you can buy them individually or as part of a bundle as well. Okay, so just the finishing touches here now with our flowers, and then yeah, I think I'll put that there. Pop that in, and I have one little daisy left. Sure, we'll pop that in since it's there. I'm going to actually stick that to the MDF, and there we have it. So that is our A Country Walk stamp turned into a lovely dimensional gift card. You could of course put acetate in there in a window and turned into a shaker card to finish it off, but I think it's absolutely a fun little project, and you can fold it flat if you want to pop it in an envelope for posting. So it's a great little fold, and then when someone gets it, they just have to open it up and pop it open, and you can write any details and sentiment on the back. So there you have it. That's our Country Walk gate project. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.